Daniel stood frozen as ice water ran down his mother's face, dripping onto her old green dress in front of 200 guests. His wife had done it on purpose, calling his mother an embarrassment in front of the whole company. What Vanessa didn't know was that this wasn't just any company party, it was Daniel's company. And in exactly 30 seconds, the whole room was about to find out exactly who she'd just humiliated. Before we get into tonight's story, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if you're new here, go ahead and hit subscribe, because this one is going to stay with you long after it ends, especially once you see what happens in the next few minutes. Daniel Reyes had worked in the warehouse division of Reyes Global Logistics for almost 2 years, and in that time, not one single person on the floor had ever questioned why the new hire asked so many detailed questions about shipping routes, budget waste, and employee complaints. They just assumed he was thorough, maybe hoping for a promotion someday, the kind of quiet, hard-working guy nobody paid too much attention to, the kind who showed up early and stayed late without ever asking for credit. What none of them knew, not his coworkers, not his supervisor, not even his own wife, was that Daniel wasn't just an employee. He was the founder, the man whose name sat quietly on paperwork nobody in the building ever connected to the quiet guy who loaded trucks on the morning shift, ate lunch alone in his car, and clocked out at 5 like everyone else. Only one person at the company knew the truth: Owen Pratt, the chief operating officer, and his late father's oldest friend, the man who had helped Daniel disappear into his own company so he could understand it from the ground up, the way his father always said a real leader should, before he ever let anyone call him boss. Tonight was the company's annual investor gala, the biggest night on the calendar, and Daniel had brought his mother Margaret as his date, the same way he always did, because Margaret Reyes had raised him alone after his father passed, working double shifts at a diner for years to keep food on the table and a roof over his head, never once complaining about how tired she was when he got home from school. She wore her good green dress, the one she'd owned for over a decade, carefully pressed for the occasion, her silver hair pinned neatly, a small string of pearls at her neck that had belonged to her own mother, and walked into that ballroom with her head high, proud of her son even though, as far as she knew, he was just a hard-working warehouse employee at a company that was doing him a favor by inviting him at all. Vanessa, Daniel's wife, had a very different reaction to Margaret's presence that evening. She'd spent the entire car ride complaining that this event was full of important people, executives and investors in designer clothes, and that Margaret's old green dress and worn handbag were going to make all three of them look out of place in front of people Vanessa desperately wanted to impress, people she'd been studying and researching for weeks. Daniel had brushed it off the way he usually did, telling her his mother looked lovely and that none of it mattered, not realizing how much resentment Vanessa had actually been carrying into that ballroom with her, resentment that had nothing to do with fashion and everything to do with a man named David Sinclair, a wealthy vice president Vanessa had been quietly orbiting for months, a man whose attention made her feel like the life she actually wanted was finally within reach. It happened fast, faster than anyone in that ballroom expected. Margaret was standing near the dessert table, chatting warmly with an older security guard about the beautiful chandeliers hanging above them, when Vanessa approached from behind, holding a full pitcher of ice water meant for the head table. "This is embarrassing," Vanessa said, loud enough for the nearby guests to hear, her voice sharp and clipped. "You look like you wandered in from the kitchen staff." And before Margaret could even turn around to respond, Vanessa tipped the pitcher, and ice water poured down over Margaret's silver hair, soaking into the collar of her green dress, running down her arms as she gasped and stumbled back a step, one hand pressed to her chest in shock, the string of pearls at her neck now dripping with water. The room went completely silent, the kind of silence that swallows an entire ballroom whole. Nearby guests froze mid-conversation, glasses halfway to their lips, and for one long, terrible second, nobody moved to help, everyone too stunned to do anything but stare. Margaret stood there dripping and humiliated in front of 200 of the wealthiest people in the city, her carefully pressed dress ruined, her silver hair plastered flat against her forehead, her dignity stripped bare in front of strangers who had known her for less than an evening, and Daniel, standing only a few feet away, felt something inside his chest crack open in a way it never had before, not through years of watching his mother struggle, not through anything he'd ever endured himself. If you've ever watched someone you love get humiliated and felt completely powerless in that exact moment, go ahead and drop a comment, because what happened next in that ballroom is something none of those 200 guests ever expected, and honestly, neither did Vanessa, not even close. Daniel moved toward his mother immediately, pulling off his own jacket to wrap around her shoulders, his jaw tight, his hands steady even as everything in him wanted to shake with anger he'd never once let himself feel in public before. Not in 2 years of quietly watching this company from the inside. But before he could say a single word to his wife, before anyone could even begin to process what they'd just witnessed, a familiar voice rang out clear and commanding from the stage at the front of the ballroom. Owen Pratt stood at the podium, tapping the microphone once, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed directly on Daniel, calm and unhurried, like a man who had waited a long time for exactly this moment to arrive. "Before we continue tonight's program," Owen said, his voice steady and deliberate, carrying easily over the stunned murmurs still rippling through the room, "I'd like to introduce someone very important to this company, a man most of you have actually met tonight without realizing it. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder of Reyes Global Logistics, Mr. Daniel Reyes." And as 200 stunned faces slowly turned toward the man standing beside his soaked, trembling mother, the entire room went absolutely, completely still, waiting to see what the founder of Reyes Global would do next. For several seconds, Daniel did not move. Owen's words hung above the ballroom as every guest stared at him. Vanessa's face lost all color. David Sinclair lowered his glass and stepped away from her. Daniel ignored them both. He wrapped his jacket around Margaret, asked a server for a towel, and made sure his mother could stand. Only then did he walk toward the stage. He did not rush or look angry. That calm frightened Vanessa more than shouting. Owen handed him the microphone. Daniel looked across the room, then at the woman who had humiliated his mother. "Mr. Pratt told you the truth," he said. "I founded this company 11 years ago." Whispers moved through the crowd. Vanessa's lips parted, but no sound came out. She thought the secret was the worst thing she would learn that night. She was wrong. Daniel explained that Reyes Global had begun with one rented truck, a small office, and the last of his father's savings. As it grew, reports from managers stopped matching what workers told him. Good employees were leaving, and money was being wasted. 2 years earlier, he asked Owen to run daily operations while he entered the warehouse under his own name. Most people knew the founder only as D. Reyes and Daniel had avoided company photographs. He loaded trucks, cleaned spills, ate with drivers, and listened. His mother knew he had built a business, but Daniel told her it had failed because she could never hide a secret. He kept the truth from Vanessa because she had started judging people by their money. He wanted to learn whether she still loved the man she believed was poor. The answer was standing beside the dessert table in a soaked green dress. Daniel turned toward Margaret. "My mother worked nights in a diner so I could finish school," he told the guests. "When I had no money for my first truck payment, she sold her wedding ring." Every building, vehicle, and paycheck connected to this company began with her sacrifice. Workers near the back started clapping. Others joined them until the sound filled the ballroom. Margaret lowered her eyes, not from shame, but because she was trying not to cry. Daniel raised one hand, and the applause faded. "Tonight should have honored people like her," he continued. "Instead, someone decided an old dress meant an old woman had no value." Vanessa stepped toward him. "Daniel, please," she said. But he had not finished, and what he said next made even Owen look at her. "No one will be punished because of who they married," Daniel said. "But no one will escape the result of what they choose to do." Vanessa placed the empty pitcher on a table, as if that could erase the last few minutes. She hurried to Margaret and reached for her hand. "I am so sorry," she said. "I was nervous. I drank too much. I made one terrible mistake." Margaret pulled her hand away. Daniel noticed how different Vanessa sounded. In the car, she had called his mother a burden. At the dessert table, she had called her an embarrassment. Now that Daniel was wealthy, Vanessa was calling her Mom. If you believe money can reveal a person's true heart, comment, "Never judge." Daniel had spent years hoping he was wrong about his wife. Her sudden kindness gave him the answer he had feared. Before he could respond, Margaret swayed. The towel slipped from her shoulders, and her hand pressed against her chest. Daniel caught her before she fell. Her breathing was short, and she said the room was turning. The gala had a medical team because many guests were older, and 2 nurses reached her within seconds. They checked her pulse, placed her in a chair, and asked everyone to step back. One nurse said Margaret's heartbeat was uneven, and stress could make it worse. An ambulance was called. Daniel's anger became fear. Vanessa began crying, but he did not comfort her. He knelt beside Margaret, held her cold hands, and promised to stay with her. Then she leaned close and whispered 6 words that changed the whole night. She warned me this would happen. Daniel thought his mother was confused, but her eyes were clear. She said Vanessa had called that afternoon and warned her not to come in her charity shop clothes. When Margaret replied that Daniel had invited her, Vanessa said she would make her regret showing up. Margaret had stayed quiet because she knew Daniel cared about his marriage and did not want to cause a fight before the gala. She had hoped Vanessa would calm down. Daniel stood and looked across the ballroom. Vanessa was no longer crying. She was speaking to David Sinclair near a side door. David kept glancing toward the lobby while Vanessa held his arm, begging him not to leave. Daniel could no longer believe the water was a cruel act done in sudden anger. His mother's words proved it had started hours earlier. The ambulance crew placed Margaret on a stretcher for the trip to St. Anne's Hospital. Daniel walked beside her while Owen cleared a path. Near the doors, Margaret asked him not to destroy his life because of her. He bent close and said, "You are the reason I have a life." Vanessa tried to follow, but Daniel stopped her. She said she loved him, had always believed in him, and could explain everything at home. Daniel reminded her that only an hour earlier she had called his warehouse pay humiliating. Vanessa claimed he had misunderstood. Then she exposed herself without Daniel asking a question. "David meant nothing to me," she blurted out. Daniel had never mentioned David. Across the lobby, the vice president froze with one hand on the exit door. Daniel wanted to confront them, but the ambulance crew needed to leave. His mother came first. He asked Owen to have security save every recording from the ballroom, hallways, and parking area. No one was to be threatened, and no phone was to be taken. Owen only needed to protect the evidence. Vanessa's fear deepened when she heard the word recording. Daniel climbed into the ambulance and held Margaret's hand. At the hospital, a doctor said she had suffered a dangerous stress reaction and needed heart monitoring overnight, but she was stable. Daniel finally breathed again. Then Owen called. "The ballroom video is safe," he said, "but that isn't what you need to see first. We found Vanessa and David on the parking garage camera before the party. They were planning something, and your name came up." Daniel looked through the glass at his sleeping mother. "Send me everything." A moment later, the video appeared, and the voice he heard made his blood run cold. The voice on Daniel's phone belonged to Vanessa. The garage camera had caught her and David beside his car before the gala. The picture was grainy, but the sound was clear. Vanessa said she was tired of being dragged down by a warehouse worker and his diner waitress mother. After the party, everyone important would understand she did not belong with people like them. David warned her not to create a scene while the merger was close to being signed. Vanessa laughed. "By tomorrow, Daniel will know I'm done carrying his shame." David did not stop her. He opened the passenger door, and they drove toward the ballroom together. Daniel watched twice, trying to understand how his wife had become a stranger. He remembered every time she had mocked his work while he had stayed quiet. Before he could call Owen, a new crisis reached him. A nurse asked Daniel to let Margaret rest. Her heart rhythm was improving, but the doctor wanted no more stress around her. Daniel stepped into the hall as messages arrived from board members, lawyers, and investors. A gala guest had recorded Vanessa pouring the water, and the video was spreading online. By sunrise, millions had seen it. Some blamed Vanessa. Others asked why a major company's founder had hidden inside his warehouse and kept his identity from his wife. The timing was terrible. Reyes Global was 3 days from signing a merger with North Star Freight, a deal that would protect thousands of jobs and open new routes. Both companies had spent 18 months preparing for that moment. North Star's chairwoman gave Owen one warning. Unless Daniel controlled the crisis by noon, the signing would be delayed. Vanessa moved first. From a hotel room, she posted a tearful video saying the water had been an accident during a family argument. She claimed Margaret had insulted her, Daniel had lied throughout their marriage, and the online clip looked cruel because no one heard her side. She never apologized to Margaret by name. Instead, she called herself a confused wife who discovered her husband had secretly tested her for years. Many viewers doubted her, but enough believed her to create doubt. Several television hosts even asked whether Daniel had staged the entire night. Reporters gathered outside the hospital, and company phones rang without stopping. While Vanessa asked the public for sympathy, she kept sending private messages to David. She did not know his company phone stored business messages in Reyes Global's legal archive. When Owen opened those records, the story changed again. For 6 months, Vanessa had sent David photographs, dinner invitations, and messages about the life she wanted. She complained about Daniel's paycheck and said she deserved a powerful man. At first, David answered carefully. Then he encouraged her. He told her which events to attend, what to wear, and which investors to impress. He also asked about Daniel's warehouse work, including which records he studied and managers he distrusted. Vanessa believed David wanted her. She had mistaken his questions for concern about their future together. In truth, he seemed more interested in anything Daniel might know. Her final message before the gala removed all doubt. Once his mother is embarrassed in front of everyone, Daniel will see that I'm finished with his poor little life. Then you can stop hiding what we are. David answered, make sure it looks final. Daniel felt sick, but he forced himself to think like an owner. Firing David might feel satisfying, yet doing it without an investigation could damage the merger and let David claim revenge. Daniel asked the board to appoint an outside lawyer to review the evidence. He removed himself from the decision, and David was placed on paid leave until the facts were confirmed. The directors accepted the process because it protected both fairness and the evidence. He also refused to use company money or employees against Vanessa because their marriage was private. Owen agreed, though he saw what the choice cost him. In Margaret's room, Daniel said only that the online video had caused trouble at work. She squeezed his hand. Do what is right, not what feels good today. He promised he would, but while he protected the company from his anger, Vanessa made a move that could destroy it. At 10 that morning, her lawyer filed an emergency request to delay the merger. Vanessa claimed Daniel had hidden valuable property during their marriage and that Reyes Global might partly belong to her. The company existed before they met, but her claim could create weeks of hearings over how its value had grown. North Star did not have weeks. Its financing would soon expire, and any delay could end the deal. Even a short court order could frighten away North Star's lenders. Vanessa gave another interview, saying she wanted no money, only the truth. Yet her filing asked the court to block Daniel from changing ownership, selling shares, or completing the merger. Investors became nervous. 2 major clients paused new contracts, and the board called an emergency meeting. Daniel had to defend his mother, his marriage, and thousands of workers without turning their futures into a public fight. At the meeting, directors urged Daniel to attack Vanessa's story and release every private message. He refused. Exposing the affair might save his reputation for a day, but it could look like the company used private records to silence his wife. Instead, he spoke to North Star's leaders. He admitted hiding his identity had hurt people he loved, though his goal was to understand his workers. He promised an independent review, protection for employees who had spoken honestly, and no part in the investigation of David. He answered every question without blaming Vanessa for his own decisions. With Margaret's permission, he shared that she was stable. His calm answers eased the room. North Star's chairwoman would continue if the court rejected Vanessa's request. The merger seemed possible again. Then the outside lawyer opened the documents attached to Vanessa's filing. One document was a confidential merger agreement Vanessa should never have seen. Each copy carried a hidden mark showing who received it, and this one belonged to David. But several pages did not match the agreement Daniel and North Star had approved. New terms would remove Daniel from the board after 6 months, give David control of daily operations, and allow assets to be sold without the founder's approval. Daniel asked whether Vanessa's lawyer had changed it. The outside lawyer shook her head. Computer records showed the false version was created 3 months earlier on David's office computer. The affair, his questions about Daniel's warehouse work, and the gala scene were not separate problems. They were pieces of one plan. Owen stared at the altered agreement before saying what no one wanted to hear. David wasn't trying to join Reyes Global. He was trying to take it from you. 3 days later, Daniel stood before cameras in the Reyes Global conference hall. North Star's leaders and the company's board sat behind him. Margaret had left the hospital, but watched from home under her doctor's orders. Daniel carried no prepared speech. An empty chair beside him carried Margaret's name, reminding everyone why they were there. He admitted that the woman in the green dress was his mother, the woman holding the pitcher was his wife, and the silent man was him. He did not excuse Vanessa's behavior or pretend his choices had caused no harm. "I hid my position to learn the truth about my company," he said. "In doing so, I created secrets inside my home. That was my mistake. What happened to my mother was not." Reporters expected him to attack Vanessa. Instead, he revealed something that changed the entire crisis. Daniel explained that an outside legal team now controlled the investigation. He had removed himself from decisions involving David, so no one could claim a hurt husband was using company power for revenge. The review confirmed David created a false merger agreement, shared private papers, and used Vanessa to learn what Daniel discovered in the warehouse. The same review cleared North Star's leaders of any part in David's secret plan. The real agreement never gave David control, and North Star never approved the false pages. Daniel would not release romantic messages or turn his divorce into public entertainment. He shared only records connected to company business and the outside lawyer's report. "Honesty does not mean showing the world every wound," he said. "It means showing the facts people have a right to know." The reporters became quiet, but the most dangerous question had not been answered. One journalist asked whether David and Vanessa expected to control Reyes Global together. The outside lawyer answered. Messages showed Vanessa had told David she would receive half the company if she left Daniel. He believed her and planned to use those shares to remove Daniel after the merger. He encouraged her because he thought she could give him access and power. But Vanessa never mentioned the prenuptial agreement she signed before the wedding. When David's lawyer learned the truth, David stopped answering her and blamed the plan on her. The man Vanessa chose over her husband had never planned a future with her. He planned to use her name on a voting document, then leave once he controlled the board. By the time she understood, David had given investigators a statement accusing her of everything. That betrayal hurt her more than any courtroom ruling could. His statement did not save him. The board fired David and gave the altered agreement, messages, and computer records to the authorities. The court then reviewed Vanessa's request to block the merger. Before their marriage, Daniel had fully disclosed his ownership of Reyes Global in the prenup. Vanessa had her own lawyer, weeks to review it, and signed a clear promise that the company would remain Daniel's separate property. She believed the business was small and nearly worthless, so she asked no questions. The judge noted that Vanessa had signed freely after receiving independent legal advice. Her request was denied. She kept her savings, belongings, and property that was already hers, but received no company shares or extra merger payment. Daniel did not smile. Losing a marriage was still a loss, even when leaving was necessary. Yet Vanessa's hardest reckoning happened outside the courtroom. The public had seen her video beside the garage recording and business messages. The people she tried to impress stopped returning her calls. David refused to see her, and her public lawyer withdrew after learning she had provided false information. Vanessa removed her videos and sent Margaret a handwritten apology. The letter admitted that jealousy had mattered more to her than the family she already had. Margaret read it once and placed it in a drawer. She told Daniel, "Forgiveness can free your heart without reopening your door." He carried those words into the divorce. He did not insult Vanessa in court or try to leave her helpless. He followed the prenup, paid what he owed, and ended the marriage quietly. For the first time in years, he stopped asking whether patience could change someone who did not want to change. That peace mattered more than winning. With the legal block removed, North Star approved the merger. Daniel added safeguards requiring outside directors to review major asset sales and giving employees a private way to report misconduct. No warehouses closed, no drivers lost jobs, and new routes created hundreds of positions. Workers watched the signing from break rooms across the country and cheered together. At the event, Daniel invited Margaret onto the stage. She wore the same green dress, cleaned and pressed, with her mother's pearls. Reyes Global and North Star announced the Margaret Reyes Second Chance Scholarship, a permanent fund for children of hourly workers and employees returning to school. Margaret covered her mouth when the first students thanked her. "I only sold one ring," she whispered. "You turned it into thousands of chances." The room rose for her, and this time every eye held respect. Months passed. Daniel remained chairman, but no longer hid behind a warehouse time card. Once a month, he worked beside drivers and loaders, with his name clearly printed on his badge. He returned to the food bank, where he had volunteered for years. There he had met Grace Turner, a school counselor who knew him as the quiet warehouse worker who carried the heaviest boxes. She had never asked what he earned or what kind of car he drove. Before the gala, she liked his patience, dry jokes, and habit of calling his mother during breaks. After the truth became public, she treated him the same. Daniel waited until his divorce was final before asking her to dinner, and told her everything first. Grace smiled. "I cared about the man stacking cans. The company is only part of his story." Their relationship grew slowly, without tests, secrets, or expensive displays. One evening, Daniel, Margaret, and Grace ate in Margaret's small kitchen. No cameras waited outside. No investors watched. Margaret served soup in bowls she had owned for 20 years. And Daniel felt richer there than he ever had in a ballroom. He had saved the merger, protected his workers, and left a marriage built on appearances. But the greatest lesson had cost him nothing and everything. Wealth could reveal character, yet kindness revealed it first. Margaret reached across the table and held his hand, as she had when he was a frightened boy with an impossible dream. If this story reminded you that dignity is worth more than money and the right people love your heart before they know what you own, subscribe and stay with us. There are more stories waiting for anyone who believes truth may arrive late, but it always finds its way home.